Greetings and welcome to Captain John's almost live story half hour, brought to you from the lovely fishing village of Little River, Nova Scotia, Canada. So you know what my stories are about, hopefully to take you away from the craziness of what's going on in the world for a little while. And today we are going back to sea, doing another boat delivery, and this time with some unforeseen consequences. Alright, so I'm going to be reading from my second book. Everyone said I should write another book. I shall put my glasses on so I can see what I'm saying, and we will head off on another adventure out in the Atlantic. The title of this story is Crazy Crew. I didn't have a good feeling about Patrick from the way he weakly shook my hand and his eyes shifted away from mine. He was in his mid-30s, pasty and unhealthy looking, and claimed to have a lot of sailing experience around the British Isles. With his strong Irish accent, he definitely hailed from that area, but that didn't mean he was a sailor. He was to be first mate on this delivery, and a nondescript, thin young man named Fred was my other crew. This trip was the shortest, from Charleston, South Carolina, to Tortola, the most northerly moorings base in the Caribbean chain, sailing distance of about 1,100 miles. If the winds were good for the first few days heading east to find the trade winds, and the trades held steady, it shouldn't take more than 10 days. It was January 1995, and I already had several deliveries under my belt as a captain for St. Bart's Yachts, which had the contract to deliver new Beneteau sailboats to various moorings bases in the West Indies. The charter boat was delivered by truck to the Charleston dock, lifted off the transporter and launched. The mast was stepped, systems were hurriedly inspected and tested by the shore crew. Engine was run for a few hours, sails bent on, standing rigging checked, running rigging run through its blocks, ready to go. Couple of hours at the market, provisions loaded aboard and stowed, easy food to provide quick meals and snacks. We each had our own cabin on this 37-foot Beneteau and stowed our personal gear aboard. Patrick didn't have much, not even a good foul weather jacket. I suggested he invest in one as it will be cold for the first few days. Now that would be nice, Captain. Sure, and I don't have the coin, know what I mean? Wait a minute, Patrick. Even though you've got a return plane ticket, you're still going to be on Tortola for a couple of days. Don't you have some spending money? How are you going to eat? Well, I thought I'd stay on the boat and eat whatever's left over from the trip. That's okay now, ain't it, Captain? No, not really. We need to be off the boat pretty quick, as the Tortola crew usually need to prep the boat for its first charter. I'll see if I can arrange something when we get there. Meanwhile, you need some protection in case a storm blows up. I'll see if someone left something behind in the crew house. I jumped in the Bugatti and drove the couple of miles to the sprawling house where captains and new crew could sleep between deliveries. I rummaged around and found a battered, abandoned, oily jacket. I was already a bit unsure about Patrick, and I should have paid attention to my gut feeling. As a delivery captain, I was totally responsible for getting these new and expensive boats to their bases in tip-top condition. I would never know who my two crew members were until about 3 days before we were cast off and head out on an unknown voyage. I was the ocean-going equivalent of a test pilot with a brand new boat and a crew I didn't know at all. They usually had some sailing experience, or claimed to, and were looking for an ocean adventure. Food was provided on the boat and a one-way plane ticket back to their home, but no pay. Before turning the boats over to the bases in the islands, we had to thoroughly clean the outside and deck, make sure the interior was spotless, and remove any leftover food. I usually donated it to a local charity on the island. We went to sleep early after having turned down Patrick's invitation to go to a local bar. I knew I'd be paying for all the drinks, and anyway, I told him, we're leaving with the early tide and I want my crew to be well rested. He grumbled a bit and disappeared into his cabin. I said goodnight to Fred, who had hovered in the background the past couple of days, pleasantly helping when asked, doing his fair share of the work. The weather forecast was favourable, and after a cup of coffee and shaking a protesting Patrick awake, I eased the boat away from the dock and turned down the waterway and out to sea. As we motored away, I gave the crew a rundown of their duties and safety protocols and what was expected of them. We picked our watch schedule, and I strongly advised the off-watch, Patrick, to get some more rest, as the first 24 hours were usually pretty tiring on a body not used to the motion of the sea. He brushed me off, saying he was fine, and went up and sat on the deck, leaning against the mast. My uneasiness about him grew, but I had a lot to do and went about my duties, watching Fred, who was at the wheel. He was attentive and had a smile on his face as he held the course I had given him. I checked the bilges, restowed some food, made sure everything was shipshape. Back on deck, I had Fred turn the boat into the wind and told Patrick to help me raise the sails. "But, Captain, I'm off watch now," he whined. Never had a crew acted that way, and had I known what was going to happen 2 days from then, I would have turned back to land and thrown him off. But I don't like confrontations in a small boat with people I don't know, especially at the start of the passage. "Okay, that's fine, mate. Fred and I will handle it, no worries." With all sail up, moving nicely in the southwest wind, we crossed into the Gulf Stream as dusk fell. It was time for Patrick's watch, and after showing him the course to hold, I went below to update the log. I also wanted to keep an eye on him for a little while before getting a couple of hours' sleep. He struggled with the wheel and kept falling off 20 degrees, then overcorrecting, and the sails would luff. Then he'd fall off the wind again and bring it back too much. We were leaving a zigzag wake, which, if it continued, would slow us down and put unnecessary strain and wear on the sails. I came into the cockpit and sat down next to him. "So, a bit hard to keep her on course, eh?" I asked good-naturedly. "Oh, aye, sure, and she's tricky to handle, this one," he replied. Actually, these boats are designed to handle easily, as they were going into a charter fleet where many different people with varying skill levels will be sailing them around the Virgin Islands for a week at a time. "Yes, it's definitely harder to sail at night, Patrick, but I think you're focusing too intently on just the compass. Why don't you pick a star close to the horizon and hold your course on it for an hour or so? Then, because they're not stationary, pick another one that will keep you on your course. Occasionally look down at the compass to confirm that you are on course. That's a trick I learned years ago, and it'll make steering easier and keep us where we want to be going." Rather than thanking me for the advice, he took offense as if I was attacking him. "Hey now, don't tell me how to steer. I've steered at night lots of times. This boat's just a bitch to keep on course." I decided to agree with him and calm him down. "Okay, Patrick, just do the best you can. I'll relieve you in 3 hours. Call me if anything comes up. And don't forget to check all around the horizon every 15 minutes. I backed off and went below. In my log, I entered that my first mate was being a problem and likely had little, if any, sailing experience. Certainly not what he claimed in the application form. I slept restlessly for a couple of hours, then went back on deck. It was a beautiful, cloudless, black, starry night with a cool breeze which had veered more westerly. The sails were now in too tight and should have been eased to catch the shifted wind. "Hey, Patrick, how's it going?" "I'm tired. My arms ache and the boat's hard to handle," he replied gruffly. "Well, it looks like the wind's veered. If you ease the sails, it will take pressure off the rudder and should be much easier to handle, mate." He should have known this. Anyone with basic sailing skills would have known this. This man did not know what he was doing, and we still had 1,000 miles to go. I had a deadline to get the boat to Tortola, and turning back at this point was not an option. I'd need to handle this volatile man delicately and not provoke or upset him. Why don't you turn in? I'll relieve you. The first day out can be tiring and a bit disorienting. Good night. He moved from behind the wheel and staggered across the cockpit. Stumbling down the companionway steps, I heard him curse as he caught himself. Well, Fred seemed capable and eager to learn, and although it would be exhausting, the two of us could handle all the sailing if necessary. I tied the wheel off and dashed below, grabbed a CD and adjusted the fade so only the outside speakers worked. I settled in for my watch and was soon lost in the rhythm of a good boat at sea on a beautiful night. With an early Moody Blues album playing softly, I sailed into the night, ever eastwards, through and across a gentle Gulf Stream, forgetting my crew problem for a while. The next day went pleasantly, with Fred continuing to be enthusiastic and a good shipmate. Patrick, on the other hand, didn't clean up his dishes after breakfast and grumbled when it was his turn for a watch. He seemed uneasy on deck, kept staring around the horizon where there's nothing to be seen except the endless, timeless ocean all around us. During his next watch, I hung out in the cockpit, giving some gentle steering suggestions, which were received non-committally. This was one delivery where it would have been great to have had an autopilot, but we didn't. We sailed east, hoping to find the trade winds the next day or the day after. Fred and I covered some of Patrick's watch when he showed up late, something I normally never tolerated. But I decided to let it go, for his behavior was becoming a little more erratic. There is a condition called sea shock, which is how someone may react when they realize they are in the middle of the ocean on a small boat and it will take a long time to get back to land. Although it's never affected me personally, I had talked with other delivery captains who had crew that were on their first ocean passage. Some of them had suffered various degrees of shock and confusion, but they generally came out of it after a quiet chat and reassurance. I tried talking to Patrick, but he rebuffed me. There was nothing further I could do. He stood his watch that second night, and we lost more time as he continued to sail erratically. Fred relieved him at 0200 hours, and I was sitting at the navigation station to the right of the companionway steps when Patrick came down. The only light in the cabin was a small red overhead bulb which cast its subdued glow on my chart. I turned my head to say goodnight to Patrick and froze in my seat. He looked slightly crazy in the shadow cast by the red light. His breathing was short and gasping. His hair was awry, and he was clutching a very sharp 6-inch kitchen knife in his right hand, pointing it at my chest. That's the end of part 1. How would you resolve this situation? Well, if you want to find out how I did, please go to part 2. The link is in the text, in the Facebook text. Also, if you enjoy my stories, please subscribe, and I'll see you in a couple minutes in part 2 of Crazy Crew.